This code right here is a code that I have diagnosed many times at the dealership when these were new and when they're out of warranty. It's the 191 code on the 6.7 Cummins found in the Ram trucks. And it's usually the model year 11 and 12. And I think that's just because of the tuning. Those years are aggressively trying to meet emission standards. They still had no SCR catalyst. And the tuning on these model year trucks was not that great on the 11 and 12 model year. Anyways, they're prone to check engine lights. In this 191 code, I want to talk about in a little bit of depth here and what I've found. These are freeze frame reports that I've collected over the years, and we're looking at freeze frame on a 2010 Ram 6.7 Cummins truck, 191 code set. And you see this one set at idle, coolant fully warmed up, road speed 0 miles per hour, and the fuel rail pressure is right here, 5,860 commanded, and it was about 800 psi too low when the code set. Now if you read the description, it says fuel rail pressure sensor circuit performance. So that's not really a circuit performance issue. I guess it could be, it could be a bad sensor, but there's almost no way to confirm it's a bad sensor. There is no tool on this engine to stick on the common rail and have your sensor in parallel with the mechanical gauge. And there's no second sensor on the system. So you're really at the mercy of the computer and checking your wiring and stuff like that, which you can do. Here's another one, 191, 2011, set the code under the same exact conditions. And my experience is this code set, it takes about 3 to 4 weeks of driving for it to set again after you clear it without doing anything. And it sets coming off the freeway, usually coming to a stop. And that's when the monitor runs. And what makes it really intermittent and hard to diagnose for the dealership and the independent shops is that it only runs the monitor once per drive cycle. And for the longest time, it would show fuel rail pressure sensor as the only possible cause, and it would just basically have you put a sensor in it, and that's as far as it would take you. And it would very rarely fix it when we were working on these trucks at the dealership. And it seems to be mostly the 2011, 2010, and 2012 model year Ram diesel 6.7 trucks. Now, you can have this code on other Cummins trucks like the 5.9 diesel and maybe a newer 6.7 and have it be a restricted fuel filter. So this is not the only possible cause, but we're talking about this 2011 in particular and 10 and 12 model years. So you look at the information on the trouble chart and you follow it, and they've added injector return flow testing. For years it didn't have that, like I was saying, but this is where people get lost even at the dealership level, because the instructions on how to do an injector return flow test, even at the dealership level, there isn't, in my experience, there was never a video, there was never good pictures on how to do it. And also, most dealerships don't have a dealer technician beyond 1 or 2 technicians. So you're limited on your diagnosis, even at the dealer level, of being accurate. Now, you perform this test, and let's say that the technician does it right. In my experience, and I've dealt with this code on the model years we're talking about, probably about 30 to 40 times in my 10 years working at the dealerships. And in that time, you would do the return test, and the return test would come back around 210, 190, that range of injector return flow. The maximum return flow in 30 seconds generally is 210 milliliters if you do everything correctly. But it's a very crude test. You're using a hose and a bucket and a measuring glass, and it's just not at all a good valid test, but that's all we have, and that's all that was ever created for this code and this problem. So you do the test, and then it would be within spec, kind of, barely, usually, and then you ask yourself, well, what do you do? Well, the chart tells you to replace the fuel rail pressure sensor, and that's a very expensive sensor and not easy to replace. So then they replace that, maybe throw a fuel filter in it, and they think it's fixed because they road test it and it doesn't come back. But again, the code is only checked or monitored once per drive cycle. you know, as you see right there, the idle monitor runs once per drive cycle. So that being said, so what do? You know, you've done the injector return flow test, it's within specifications or barely in specs or maybe a little bit over. Well, you can block off each injector and reperform the injector return flow test. It's a messy test, it's time consuming. The dealer should be asking for hours to do that testing. If they're not, then it makes me wonder if they're even doing it at all, because that happens as well. But we would do these and replace one injector, and they would come back and we try the next highest. And I've done this multiple times at the dealer, and the best scenario seems to always be replacing the injectors, or if you want to be more accurate, pull all 6 injectors out. It's a big job, but pull them out, have them flow tested and microscope test. And I would use a company in San Luis Obispo called Injectors Direct, and they do a great job of looking, flow testing, and rebuilding them and repairing them and cleaning them. Maybe you don't need to replace them. Maybe it just needs a good cleaning, maybe new tips. But yeah, you gotta basically pull them out a lot of times to have them tested to really know what's going on, because it's such a small deviance of pressure. It's not thousands of PSI under, it's 500 to 800 PSI under a low load condition. Very difficult to check, and that's just my experience. I thought I'd share it with you.